mental health strikes they say 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people over the course of their lifetime, in all demographics and in all populations.
Mental illness.
Mental illness, what did I say?
It's a mental health.
Mental health, right. Halavai. Thank you, Susan. So it's mental illness strikes 1 to 4 to 1 to 5 people, between 20 and 25% of the general population worldwide will have some mental or neurological disorder affecting them during their lifetime. And so this is a very widespread issue, and it's something that both the Tanakh and our sages were very cognizant of. And there's even some level of psychological counseling that is offered at different places in the Talmud. Chazal say in Maseches Yoma, based on the pasuk, Da'aga b'lev, let me just make sure I quote the pasuk correctly. Da'aga b'lev ish yashchena, that if worry or dread is in a person's heart, he should yashchena, he should push it aside. But there's a machlokus in the Gemara, as I learned from Rabbi Pelkowitz, Rabbi Dr. Pelkowitz, that the Gemara in Yoma says that there's 2 different interpretations to this pasuk. One is Da'aga b'lev ish yishchena, that if a person has dread or worry in his heart, is upset in his heart, he should try to push it aside. And the other opinion is Yesichena la'acherim, he should discuss it with other people. And there's 2 ways to read that word, yashchena. And that tells you that there are different modalities of therapy. There can be a modality of therapy to deal with it by trying to block it out. There's a modality of therapy to discuss it and open up with others. And of course, there's the pharmacological modality of therapy, depending upon the type of mental health challenge that a person is facing. And there are many other such citations. Ma'yanei HaYeshua is a hospital in Bnei Brak that deals with the general population and has an entire wing dealing with issues of mental health. Israel is no different from any other country. It has very, very strong, courageous, and healthy people, but it has, just like any other country, a population that is a minority, but that deals with mental health issues. PTSD, I'm sure, is a very big issue in Israel. And just normal, whether it's genetic or whether it's socially stimulated, these are issues that we have to be able to take care of our brother just like we take care of our brethren with cancer, with diabetes, with chronic diseases. Mental health is one of those issues as well. And unfortunately, in previous decades, mental health was not made as a priority, not just in Israel, but in other parts of the world as well. And with a greater sense of sophistication and maturation within our society, we're able to talk more openly about these issues and discuss issues of depression, issues of mental health, and it's no longer a stigma if a person says, I suffer from a certain mental challenge, because everyone has issues. We all have a peckle. And we're grateful to Dr. Strous and all of the people at Ma'yanei HaYeshua for being able to highlight this issue for our community, as they're doing throughout Toronto and in other communities in North America. And Dr. Strous is one of the leaders of psychiatric health in Israel today. We're very honored to be able to have him speak for us. Dr. Strous.
Before Professor Strous speaks, we're going to show a brief video just to highlight some of the work that Ma'yanei HaYeshua does, both as a medical center and as a mental health facility.
My name is Professor Rael Strous. I'm the director of the psychiatric wing of the shemoneh-esrei Medical Center.
My name is Dr. Rosalind Landau, and I am the co-chairperson of the British Friends of shemoneh-esrei Medical Center. We recognize that a person with mental illness is very vulnerable, and our aim is to reduce that vulnerability as much as possible, to ensure that all their needs are acknowledged and taken care of.
Our son, who is mentally ill, has a dear rabbi friend who knew of shemoneh-esrei.
And he said, this is something you really, really need to check out. And it seemed like, wow, this is what we've been looking for.
We cover the range of psychiatric services, beginning from the emergency room to outpatient to day program and to inpatient units.
We have specialized areas. We have a male floor, a female floor, and a children's floor. So once they know they're going to have to come into the hospital, they know that their needs, their own particular needs, are going to be taken care of.
Patients arrive at the emergency room. They are seen almost immediately and receive all the services
and individualized care from the word go.
We have something very unique which I have never seen anywhere in the world. Patients are seen in the emergency room, in a separate section of the emergency room. Each therapist or each treatment provider has their own separate waiting room outside the individual treatment room. They have a separate wing for families to sit alone with the patients in the privacy of a separate section of the ward. So we do this to preserve the dignity of the patient and their confidentiality. Just because patients have mental illness doesn't mean that they should be treated in conditions that are substandard.
We didn't know that something like this even existed, where the whole person would be looked at as a whole person with dignity and with a lot of love and attention.
We have dedicated staff who are handpicked.
So we make sure that patients get the level of care that I think is deserving of them. We see as one of our focuses is having an open door policy.
Our doors are always open.
Patients can come and go as they want.
We never restrain our patients here.
And it was all open. It wasn't behind a closed door. We could go in as parents who wanted to visit my son and sit there with him. A nice open environment that was airy and beautiful both for us and for the patient.
We make sure that each patient has plenty of room and space.
We have a large staff-to-patient ratio, a very high staff-to-patient ratio. There is no overcrowding in our ward. We have a maximum of 24 beds on the ward.
It was clean. There was beautiful murals all over the walls. The bedspreads looked nice and fresh and clean. The plants, the ping pong table, it smelled nice. It didn't smell like a hospital. This was a place that really cared.
We have a dedicated family therapy unit.
A living room, a kitchen, a dining room. We have that all set up as if this is an actual apartment. And we manage the family therapy within the unit, and our results have been phenomenal.
We have not experienced that in any other hospital.
As part of the patient's rehabilitation, we offer a variety of therapies.
Art therapy, drama therapy, music therapy.
Our son is very, very creative, and shemoneh-esrei only worked to try to enhance that.
Patients can connect with aspects of the creative ability that they themselves weren't even aware of. Exercise therapy decreases anxiety, improves mood, and encourages even social interaction. Animal therapy is fascinating. You take a patient who's been sitting in the corner, not connecting with anyone, and you put a rabbit in their hand, they come alive. Suddenly they start connecting with this animal, and it's very touching. It's very touching. And we see phenomenal results in ways that we could never have predicted.
It was like night and day from anything that I had seen, both in Israel and in the United States. It was a healthy environment for healing.
We want our patients to return back to themselves. Our patients receive the best physical and mental health care that we can provide. Our patients have a voice.
Thank you very much for the honor of of meeting with you today. And I know it's not easy to come out on a Sunday morning. I thank the Rav and the community for giving us opportunity for being with you today and to share some of what we're doing. The issue that I want to discuss today is I just want to see if I can move, because I can't change. Let's do it like this. Time is somewhat limited, so as an academic, I would like to introduce the subject, talk a bit about the background, and then introduce some of the halachical Torah approach to the issue. Let me tell you a story about Ephraim. Ephraim Reish, I won't mention his last name, even though I actually published a paper about him together with him, with him as a co-author, which is the first time I've ever done that in my life. Actually publishing a paper with one of my so-called subjects. But he became a colleague. But let me tell you something about him. Ephraim was born in 1927 in Budapest, second of 7 children, grew up in a traditional home, and had a wonderful childhood. March 1944, the Nazis moved into Budapest, moved out 850,000 Jews within the space of a few weeks. He arrived in Auschwitz in July, and he was told, Zwillinge raus, twins to the side. Now, he had a brother who was 1 year ahead of him, who was 1 year older than him, but he was told by someone in the line, if you want to survive, tell Mengele, who was at the selection there, that you're twins. And that's what he did. He said they were twins, they looked similar, even though he was a year apart. They were put aside. Mengele examined him, found that his brother had a wonderful voice, and he didn't. So Mengele said, this is something we can study. So over the course of 3 months, every 4 to 5 days, Mengele injected the 2 of them through the neck, into the larynx, the voice box. And that went on for a period of 3 months, until October, when Mengele fled from Auschwitz, and then the death march. Eventually, we liberated in 1945. After a few months on the way back to Budapest in Prague, his brother was hospitalized, lost a lung, removed a lung, fell sick and died. He went back to Budapest, found none of his family alive. He was alone. He decided, is this the end of my life, or do I want to live? And he decided very actively, proactively, I want to live. And he did. He moved to Israel, built a family, became a bus driver, 2 children, 5 great-grandchildren, and 13 great-grandchildren. However, after 5 years, he also started losing his voice. And then he developed cancer in his throat, in the area. He still does not know what Mengele injected him with. They removed his voice box, and he wasn't able to speak for 19 years. He underwent 20 surgeries within the space of 2.5 years, and was hospitalized for approximately 2 years. But he came out of this. And when I met him, he was introduced to me because I do some research on mental illness after the Holocaust. And I want to understand, what is it about this man? I met him at a conference. He was completely free of any depression, any post-traumatic stress disorder, but we talk about trauma, any kind of bitterness, a happy man. What is it about him? What is it about him? And that's what I want. That's what interested me. This is the gentleman, Ephraim. You can see after 19 years, he found this in Cologne, Germany. They developed this machine that you press against his neck. You could talk through the vibrations. And that's how he began to speak in 1984, after approximately 20 years of losing his voice. So the question is, how did he do it? What was this dispositional optimism, what the research shows that talks about? What is special about Ephraim? How did he manage? So he describes having a warm family upbringing, a love of life, the ability to improvise, ability to find meaning and experience, and we'll come back to that soon, and the need to adapt accordingly. Now that's something special. What was his inspiration? Part of it was Primo Levi. Primo Levi said, the aims of life are the best defense against death, and he actively repeated it himself all the time, despite the fact that Primo Levi himself committed suicide. He quotes a surgeon after the 20 surgeries that he underwent. I accomplished 50% of what is required, now you complete the rest. And Viktor Frankl, to look life in the eye with a smile, and we'll also come back to that. So he didn't ignore his experience. He didn't say it didn't exist. It's not as if, oh, this didn't happen. He constantly analyzed it. It's constantly with him, but it's something that he didn't allow to destroy his life. It's something that he didn't allow to affect who he was and what he did with his life. Now, when we talk about the Holocaust, you know, before I moved to Shemoneh-esrei a year ago, I ran the outpatient and the chronic inpatient department in the hospital, south of Tel Aviv, all the way down. And we had an inpatient unit of Holocaust survivors who'd been in hospital since the Holocaust. So those that are there now were children at the time, but it's been open for years and years, for decades. So the question is, we always talk about Holocaust survivors and the post-trauma, but what percentage of Holocaust survivors actually suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder? What percentage of people actually suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder? And the studies have shown only about 13 to 19%, under 20% of people. There are certain traumas that there's actually much more PTSD, what we call, like rape or losing a child. I do evaluations for terrorist victims in Israel who sue in America, and there's a very high incidence of post-traumatic stress amongst people who have lost their children. But the question is, those who are actually Holocaust survivors, it's actually relatively small. What is it about them? What is it about those people that actually have the resilience? And we're going to talk about that for a moment. So there's a paradigm shift in looking at psychiatric disorders. When we look at psychiatric disorders, mental illness, we always look at the sick. But what is it about the healthy? How do we focus on the healthy? What is it we can engender health amongst people? You know, I met this week amongst different groups. We were involved in training, Hatzalah, and dealing with crisis intervention, so people don't develop long-term chronic illness. And then I spoke with some teenagers in several schools. Like, what is it about mental health? People talk about dental health and dental prevention, but what about mental health? The teachers that I spoke to said that no one's ever spoken to our children about mental health. And in Israel, we actually do that. But it sounds like, you know, that's not a common thing. Like, how do we engender mental health amongst young people so that we can give them certain skills with life that when they are faced with adversity, that they don't develop any kind of long-term. So we're trying to shift the agenda of the field. So how the at-risk, you know, the way I describe it, the at-risk for mental illness remains, how people remain unaffected tells us much about the human condition as much as those that are affected. Because we always focus on the sick. But what about focus on the well? What is it about the well? So this is the issue of resilience in the face of trauma. And that's what I want to speak about for a few minutes. What is resilience? Resilience is the ability to adapt in an optimal fashion when faced with adversity or trauma. Okay? It demands what we call flexible adaptation. I need to adapt to my situation. And there are inevitable changes. One cannot deny that there's stress and there's adversity out there. The question is, how do I deal with it? How can I optimally respond to what goes on outside there, to those challenges that I have, that I come out in a stronger and sometimes even in a more informed manner? So the resilience comes from the Latin source leap back. It's not so easy, but that's the form. And the Hebrew we call it chosen. What is chosen? Chosen is inoculation, impermeable. And that's that they talk about in Israel, chosen lomi, national resilience. Do you know during a time of war in Israel, there's no suicide. Suicide doesn't exist. After war, there's like a massive, or not, a relative increase. Which is interesting. Do you know that in Israel, there are probably about one death a day from car accidents. But more than double than that die from suicide. But no one talks about it in Israel. No one talks about it. We're starting to change the agenda. In the last 2 years, there's a movement to try to get the government to invest some money in suicide prevention. Because there's millions and millions put into motor vehicle accident prevention, but nothing in suicide prevention. Only now that's changing. Because of the stigma. People don't talk about that. Stigma in mental illness is massive. When I say how many people here, and I mentioned this on various occasions while I've been in Torah, how many people have ever visited someone in a hospital for pneumonia, broken leg, whatever, cancer? How many? Almost everyone, right? We've all done Biko Cholim. But how many people here have ever visited someone in a psychiatric hospital that's not a direct relative? Very rare. Very rare. You know, in Israel, when I go into hospitals, you can buy coke from a machine, you can buy flowers from a machine now. But I've never in 25 years of my psychiatry ever seen anyone ever bring flowers to someone in a psychiatry ward. Never seen it. Because it just doesn't happen, because of the stigma. We don't want to go there. Why bring flowers? No, we don't do it. But this is why not. They're also sick, they're also ill. There's nothing to be ashamed of. The American Psychological Association talks about resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. George Valiant, a well-known Harvard psychologist, talks about, and this is really a wonderful definition of resilience. He said, like it's a twig with a fresh green living core that springs back and continues to grow. That's a critical thing, continues to grow after encountering pressure. I think that's a wonderful description. Unfortunately, there's almost no research on resilience. That's why it was so important for me to write this paper with Ephraim. I said to him, Ephraim, there's something very special about you, and let's do something about it. And we wrote this paper together. But why is it ignored? Because psychiatry, we say we deal with the illness and not with health. But that's a mistake. Because I think we can change the gene. I think we can do something. Because how do we say, what is say, you can live a perfectly normal life, but you accept the fact that your life will never be perfectly normal. That's really true. And sometimes that makes a difference. So let's talk about the Shoah and resilience for a second, okay? So much is written about the Shoah and almost never talk PTSD. But as I mentioned, it's really not the case. Actually, a very small percentage of people develop PTSD. In fact, the whole country, Israel, was really built by Holocaust survivors. And we don't look at those who've come out with that positive answer. What is that about that positive answer? What can we learn from it? So what influences the process? So we know personality influences, coping skills, social support. Social support is a real biggie here, and we'll come back to that later. Cognitive processing, how I take that trauma and how I analyze it, what I do with it, and how it comes back out. And optimism in spite of stress. So what are the protective processes in the youth? And this is something we can learn from someone like Ephraim that really helps people. What are those aspects of a person's makeup from their earlier life that helps contribute to them developing that resilience later on when they're faced with adversity? So the researchers are saying there's something important about attachments and relationships that people have early on with important, significant others. And the positive early family environment says it all. That's what it's really mostly about. So early, warm, and close family relationships give that person the ability to deal with adversity later on. It has nothing to do with comfort, because someone like Ephraim actually grew up in poverty. But he spoke about all the time about he has this close relationship with his parents and with his community. And that's really what did it for him. And he speaks about it quite openly. And the research is actually, the little that's out there reflects that. And men talks about that. So maintained a close relationship with those around him, and especially with his brother. He was extremely close with his brother. And that's how they got through. His brother, he mentioned on several occasions, wanted to commit suicide. And that's the untold secret about the Shoah. People don't talk about it. But it's probably the highest documented incidence of suicide, national suicide in the history that we've ever known. Documented. It was a very high rate of suicide. We don't talk about it so much, but it really was. And his brother wanted to commit suicide, like many others did in Auschwitz, but he stopped his brother from doing it. And interestingly, he was the one who survived and not his brother, but obviously from medical factors. So then there's a concept of post-traumatic growth, that sometimes those who have resilience, once they overcome that adversity, they actually grow. We call it they're actually in a better place afterwards. But interestingly, and this is fascinating, the research has shown, that's come out more recently, that the higher the resilience, and the resilience scales, the con is whatever, won't go into that, it's too technical, the higher the resilience, the less the post-traumatic growth. Wow, how could that be? You would think if a person is ability to be resilient and more resilient, that they're going to grow more. But it's counterintuitive. That's actually not the case. But it actually makes sense when you really think about it. So let's say a person is faced with some kind of adversity in life. And if they've got high resilience, what does that mean? It doesn't get to them. They just move on. So they don't really grow from that because they don't really respond in some kind of intense manner. But those who do respond and are able to overcome that, they actually are the ones with the highest post-traumatic growth. And what's interesting is that with the research in Israel, which is coming out more recently, with terrorist attacks. So when we have a terrorist attack, we talk about the 2 dead and 3 seriously injured and 50 with anxiety. And then the media focus on those that are injured in hospital and whatever, severely and move down to moderate, thank God, and mild and get discharged. But what about those 50 who had intense anxiety or acute stress reactions? Interestingly enough, they've done they've done studies, right, where it's single blind because the researchers don't know. Come to an Hadassah, they just say there are 50 people that come with intense trauma after a terrorist attack. Half of them, they give calming medications, benzodiazepines, and half of them nothing. Let's just talk to them. And who do you think, and who do you think does better after 1 or 2 days? Those who got the benzodiazepine, just calms them. But who does better 1 month, 1 year, and 2 years later? Those who never got anything. Why? Because with the intense response, they're able to work through that, and they don't develop PTSD. It's the same thing when people have lost a close family member, God forbid, in some tense crisis. We shouldn't be quick to start giving them medications to calm them. It helps them maybe for the day, but in terms of the long-term response, it doesn't help so well because of this concept of post-traumatic growth. There's something about, there's a balance, obviously. You don't want to go overboard with people because they're so intense, they're not functioning at all. So it's a fine balance. But ultimately, we want to allow people to work through that. And if we don't want to wipe out the response to it. So children resilience, most young people are actually resilient to trauma. And part of that is because they just doesn't get to them. They don't see the bigger picture. Some of that is results of a sense of safety from adults, predictable routines, emotional stability, agreeableness, extroversion. So that's all associated with greater resilience. So there are 4 potential outcomes following severe kind of traumatic response, chronic dysfunction, recovery, resilience, and delayed reactions. Now let's talk about the Jewish response in a way. Because Jews have ultimately transcended catastrophe, and we've had several of these in our existence but there's something about ability to transcend it. So how have we done it? How have we managed to survive over all these centuries? If you look at the bigger picture on a sociological or epidemiological even fashion, what is it about? What is about approach? How is it that we've been able to look at adversity and survive these adversities over the centuries? There's something about our cultural capacity for renewal. What is it? What is it about it? Because I'm not talking about resilience on an individual. What about a national level? There's something special about that. So the concept in Yiddishkeit, we say every day we're renewing ourselves. Every day we have to look at ourselves. This is a new life. Every day we start again. Every day creation is renewed. And it's a concept that's mentioned in Gemara on many, many different occasions. There's something special. The Tanya says, if we change the way we think, we will change the way we feel. In other words, if we have a situation of adversity, okay, this is the first Lubavitcher Rebbe who said, so if we, this is basic psychology 101. So if I'm taking a situation, I can look at it in a different way. This is an attribution, what we call reframing. There's something where I take a situation, how can I look at this in a different perspective, and what can that change in our way? And Yiddishkeit all the time is encouraging us to look at things in a positive way, not to deny. Don't deny reality, but how can I turn things around? The Gemara says, if I put my hand in my pocket and I want to take out 10 cents, right? And it comes out, I want to take out, let's say, whatever, $1, and comes out a quarter. So that already is some kind of adversity. But how can I take that to say, okay, maybe that's going to take away a little bit from my reward in the world to come, if you're a chassid, or you can say, okay, so maybe, I'm not going to let this situation throw me off, because that's a challenge. So what do you do in times of crisis? The whole concept of bouncing back on its own does not necessarily move us forward, because we have to work through that. Adaptation is not the ultimate response either. Chazal says, and this comes up on several occasions in Talmud, we must evaluate our perspectives, our systems, not just our way, but look at the system, look at the bigger picture, retaining important functions, but developing new skills and ways of thinking. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the secret to Jewish survival. That we take the situation and we look at things in a different way and we move on. We don't allow it to throw us off. So resilience is rooted both in tradition and ability to respond to changing conditions. Now let me give you 3 examples. And this is, Tanakh, and we can see. Look at the difference between Noach and Avram. Which of the 2 became the Av of the Jews? Who became the Av Hamon Goyim? Avram, right? Avram became my father. So what is the difference of the response to adversity? Both of them had a rough time. Both of them had a rough time through Breshit. But Noah, what did he do? How did he deal with his trauma when he came out of the teva, out of the ark? He started drinking. He was overwhelmed. He was very stressed. He started drinking. He wallowed in his drink, as I say. Avram, he dealt with his adversity, and he had lots of it as well, in many different situations. And the Breshit goes through very different situations, but similar in terms of how he dealt with it. He dealt with the opposite. He built, produced, and looked forward. And therefore, Avram becomes our father, not. We begin as a nation with Avram and not with Noah. So the resilience of Am Yisrael is rooted in some way from traumatic events, but that particular is what made us stronger. There's something about going through those difficult times that has actually made us stronger. This resilience is based upon our proud and our special mission of what we say, kingdom of priests and holy nation. It just b'shed that I happen to be here in the week of really the parasha in the Torah that is probably most related to resilience. Because the parasha this week of Vayeshev talks about Yosef and Yosef HaTzadik. Why is Yosef, of all the Avot, called Yosef HaTzadik? Why dafka him is the Tzadik? Because all Avot were supposed to be very special people, right? Like why dafka was Yosef called a Tzadik? So Rav Chaim Shmulevitch, and we'll get time to read what he says inside. He said, so when Yosef goes through what he goes through, I mean, look what happens. He comes and his brothers come, and his brothers have put him into a situation. I mean, now he's okay. He's almost the control, the prime minister of Egypt, the president there. Not the king, but the president. He's got incredible power, but he went through incredible adversity to get there. Now is his opportunity to get back his brothers, but he says, no. Don't be distressed, my dear brothers. Don't be angry with yourselves because you sold me and that I suffered so much. Because it was not you who sent me here, it was God. I look at the bigger picture. I'm looking at the system. I'm not looking at my one-on-one situation and getting bitter because that person did that to me, that person did to me. That's the secret to our survival, Chazal say. Look at Yosef, look what he does. And at the end, when his father dies, he doesn't say, okay, now I've got the opportunity, my father's not around, I'm going to get you guys. No, he looks at the bigger picture. Once again, he says, you intended to do hard to me. He's not denying. Don't deny reality. He's accepting reality, but he's reframing, he's turning around and saying, you know what, I can do something positive in my life with this. Okay, so have no fear, I will still provide for you and your little ones. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitch says that that's why he's called Yosef HaTzadik, because he's the ultimate bearer of how we deal with adversity. He's the ultimate secret to Jewish survival, resilience. So another example, he said, when that starts right, and it started right from the beginning, Rav Chaim Shmulevitch said. He said when he was thrown into the pit, and then he was sold to the Ishmaelites who came along, they had gum balm and laudanum. Now, usually they have terrible things. Things with smell. But here they had perfumes. Now, how could that be? So he said that's what the favor of Hashem to Yosef, that he actually gave something positive for Yosef to hold on to help him get over that adversity. So there's something sometimes about adversity, Rav Chaim Shmulevitch says, that assists us, that we hold on to something. Doesn't matter what it is. Whatever it is for you, a lot of people do different things. But find something that you can latch onto to say, okay, this is helping and moving me through. And you know what, sometimes I say to people, okay, so you're in a diverse situation. Let's take an example in a very difficult relationship, because ultimately we have no control what happens to us in life, even sometimes when we marry, right? So you say, okay, so you're in a difficult relationship. So you can either get divorced, or you can say, okay, I'm going to accept that this is the way things are, and learn to live with it, change my expectations, and maybe find my happiness in something else, to latch onto something else. But to stand in the middle and live with adversity and frustration and bitterness and hate and anger, that's not a good thing. So that's what Rav Chaim Shmulevitch is saying. Why should it matter to him when he was exposed to tar? Because in the moments of great despair and darkness, one needs some kind of ray of hope. Latch onto something that does it for you. Maybe eat chocolate, stand in your head, run a marathon, whatever works for you. Find something, learn some Torah. Find a relationship that does work for you. Okay, just find something that really connects you to the bigger picture. Some indication that not all is lost. So for him, that's what fosters the resilience, the ability to retain hope in some way. Because even when everything's lost, if they can just hold on to some bit of hope, that can make all the difference. Sometimes it could be a memory. Because sometimes you say to people, when you've lost your mind, but memories, no one can take that from you. No one can take. When you've lost everything around you, that's what's difficult sometimes about dementia, because people are losing their memories. Because that's something that sometimes helps people move on. So Lubavitcher Rebbe in Kodesh said, a person is like a tree. And for him, the tree, for the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is what symbolizes resilience. And Lubavitcher Rebbe talks about this in many different. So what is that about a tree? So he says a tree Why are we compared to a tree in terms of our response and our ability to develop resilience? Because a tree thrives through all kinds of seasons, no matter what's going on, can withstand windstorms, can live to over 2,000 years. But most importantly, the key to the tree's survival is its thick roots. And that's the essence of the academic understanding of resilience as well. There's something about our background and our early relationships that make all the difference. Well, there's something that we can latch onto, something that gives us a strength from the past. And that's the essence of what even modern day psychiatry, how that looks at resilience. There's something special about looking back. Now that could be anything. A believing person can say, you know what, maybe that's emunah. Like any tree that begins as a plant needs to be cultivated. I need to work at that. And something needs to one can also get lost, as the Rebbe says, in a tree or the forest. But the ability to stay centered all the time, and that's what a tree is. You got your roots and you stick to them. So let's go back to Avram for a minute and let's look and see how we can approach to that. So Hashem put Avram to the test. We know that. So once again, what was the most adverse experience that Avram had? The Akedah, the sacrifice. We were supposed to sacrifice his son Yitzchak. And what was, if we look at this concept of latching onto something that holds us, something from the past or something that helps us in the future, what is that helped us through adversity? Was the shofar here, okay? Because that became the symbol of that response. And that's something that he latched onto. So, okay, sometimes I need to externalize my ability to deal with adversity and latch onto something, and that gives you meaning, and that reminds me. And that's what the shofar became for Am Yisrael. So the Ramban says that essentially what the Akedah, what the test, what the adversity did, what Avram went through, is that he had the choice. He had the choice what to decide. And the fact that he made the choice and he decided, an active choice, the Ramban says, to grow from that. That's where his post-traumatic growth came from. That he made that active choice to say, I could allow this to destroy me. Putting sacrificing my son will absolutely destroy me. But he made the active choice, so I'm going to get something out of this positive. And that's an active process. It's not a passive process. And that's really what Ephraim did as well. Ephraim represented, he made that active decision. He distinctly remembers in 1946 when his brother died and he lost his brother he was extremely close to. He went through all those years in Auschwitz with him, and coming back to Budapest and finding out he was the only person left, there was no family. He made the active choice. Do I decide to end my life now, or all is lost? Or do I decide an active choice to move forward? And that's what he did. So Avram never evades a challenge, and his instant answer at all times was Hineni, I'm here, I'm ready for the next thing. So the question is, why does Avram? Why did the Malach, the angel, say Avram's name twice? So here what Chazal tell us that was another kind of inkling towards Avram developing the resilience. He was like, okay, I'm giving you a second chance. I'm encouraging you to move on. I'm saying to you twice, I'm calling you up twice to say, Avram, take the opportunity. You have an opportunity here to take this adverse experience and to move on and to build a nation. And that's what Avram did, and that's what became a father, as I mentioned, not Noah. So he faced the suffering directly, grew from it, and he came out with a new spirit, and he was a better person for it. And we know what Avram did with his life after. So that became the perfected Avram. So the question is, why was he tested in the first place? So maybe you can say, you know what, if we really want to grow, if we really want to be something special, we all should go through some kind of adversity. So maybe that's an incentive to depth, caring, meaning. Maybe that's really what we all need. But it's not something obviously anyone wants to choose. But there's definitely something about something that goes through. So but we know that Hashem tested Avram and didn't test Yitzhak. There was something about Avram that we needed to do that. We needed to bring him out from that and to be the father of the Jewish nation and to go through that. There's something about Avram's growth that he had, and Yitzhak didn't go through it, and Yaakov wasn't tested to the extent that Avram, just Avram. So similar to Avram, life puts us all through the test, and Avram is an example as our father to show us how to deal with that kind of adversity. So we cannot choose in life whether to suffer or not. Life throws whatever it does at us. The question is, what do we do with our suffering? And that's really what the power of reframing is. And when we look at Freud got it wrong, right? Freud got it wrong. What did Freud say? Freud said, you know, you go through, you put anyone, you put, let's say, 100 people through adversity, and you lower them to the lowest kind of level of, because they're all at the, so this is what and this is what Freud said. Try and subject a number of very strongly differentiated human beings to the same amount of starvation. Okay, and I think Holocaust, right? Okay, with the increase of imperative need for food, all individual differences will be blotted out, and in their place we shall see the uniform of expression of the one unsatisfied instinct. So what's Freud saying here? What's Freud saying here? Freud's saying, you know what? Everyone is really the same. You take everyone, you put them all in the same kind of adverse situation, and everyone will become the same. Everyone will respond to the same. Everyone will become animalistic. All the animalistic instincts come out, and you will really become just like just one of everyone else. But Freud got it wrong. And how do we know he got it wrong? How do we know? Because the Shoah, you know, coming straight after Freud wrote this, not so long after, a decade or two, proved it wrong. Because the decisive factor here was man chooses for himself. What does it mean, man chooses for himself? We saw that. People made this active decision. How am I going to respond in this kind of situation? And what's the basis? What's the basis in Chazal? The Sforno. The Sforno says it very clearly. That based on the fact that Hashem made us, that we made us in Tzelem Elokim, gave us the light, the same form of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, the same form as God. He gave us the ability. What is the essence of God? It's independence, the ability to choose, for the master of choice. Free will is the ultimate divine ingredient. And we have the choice in adversity how to respond. You go through a terrible situation, two people can go through the same situation, both lose their legs. And I've seen this, unfortunately, in several situations in Israel, both in car accidents and terrorist attacks. And you see it. One is completely destroyed, and one says, you know what? I'm making an active decision to live. I have my arms, I have my head, I have my family, and in many situations their life becomes more meaningful and fulfilled because they made that active decision, and we have that basis in Chazal. You know, we know in Pirkei Avot, everything is foreseen, but the right of choice is granted. Like Kol Tzafui v'Rashut Netuna. So everything, Hashem knows exactly what's going to be, okay, because He's there already. But He gives us the ability to make the choice. How am I going to respond to that situation? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is really what resilience is about. God knowing head and us having free will are not necessarily mutually exclusive. That's the test that we're all faced with. So we have the freedom to make choices, especially in adversity. It's not a question of even in adversity, especially in adversity, because that's really what defines us. You know, I don't know how many people here are marathon runners. If you run a marathon, okay, I mentioned this on another occasion, I believe yesterday, but if you're coming towards the end of the marathon and you've got that one last kilometer and you've got to do that in 4 minutes because you want to break 3 hours for the marathon, and you know you set this goal for yourself. So it's not a question of, okay, look inside you and see what you've got, because that's really what you always think, let's see how much you have left. What can you really do with that last bit? No. That last bit, what you do in that defines you. That's what makes you who you are. It's not a question of, okay, let's see what I can do. What do I have to make good in this situation? If I'm faced with adversity in my life, what can I do? What do I have that can make this good? No. Adversity makes you who you are, that defines you, that makes you something, that you're bringing that out of yourself. It's not a question of bringing it out, you're changing yourself. And that's the challenge. That's really what the challenge is about. Because in that situation, for there, in terms of belief, I'm saying, okay, everything, Hashem controls everything, but here I'm deciding who I become based on how I respond to that situation. That's the greatest of response to adversity. And really, that's really what the ultimate, the optimal outcome of resilience is. That not only am I overcoming resilience, but I'm actually growing from it. And that's a concept of post-traumatic growth, which the academics are starting to look at. But we've had it for years. It's not a new concept in Yahadut, in Chazal. Chazal have talked about it in the Gemara. The Gemara is full of the concept. Okay, in Brachot we talk about Yisurin Shel Ava. How can that be? What does it mean, Yisurin Shel Ava? How can you suffer? How can it be suffer? You know that story, the famous story in popular culture, when you're walking along the beach, there were two sets of footprints. When you go through difficulties, there's only one, and then God says, that was when I carried you on my shoulders. It's not a Jewish story, but but the concept is the fact that There's something about going through difficulties that Hashem sees a bigger picture. And not to say, okay, don't worry, you're going through a difficult time because really it's good for you in the future. But you're defining yourself, you're changing yourself. We don't choose to be in those situations, but we're choosing to grow from it. We choose to become a better person. And that's really the ultimate response. That's the ultimate Jewish response. So the dominant message of healthy existence, in our moments of greatest joy, we recall our losses. And in the moments of greatest losses, we recall our joy. Isn't that Yiddishkeit? Right? And under the chuppah, we break the glass. Right? And then during the time of Shiva, we sang Kaddish. We're talking about the joy of our relationship, or the depth of our relationship with a higher being, with a higher source, or something outside of us, something bigger than us. That's really what it's about. And that's what fosters resilience. So what are the traits of resilient individuals? If you look at the basis of Chazal and look at what their research shows, have a moral compass, have faith, sense of humor, very important, social support, community, that's critical, calling in their life, that's really about meaning, problem-solving skills, understand that stressful situations not necessarily define them, but I define myself, how I respond to it, accept that life isn't perfect, know when to ask for help, and a sense of gratitude. And I love that last one. There's a lot of research coming out now to say there's something about hakarat hatov, a sense of gratitude that fosters happiness and protects against depression. Just fascinating. Like, what about hakarat hatov, sense of gratitude? And research showing that. You show gratitude in life, or you foster the ability of your children to show gratitude, there's a much less risk of your children having depression later on. There's something very special. We see that in last week's parasha. You know, in the epiphany of his connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, Yaakov, and at Beit El, and he's connecting with God on all the spiritual dimensions. And suddenly, the parasha in the middle says he buried Dvorah, the maidservant of his mother. What does that mean? Why does it have to? Because he's showing gratitude that it's made the maneket, that who looked after his mother, she was niftar, she died, and he buried and gave her respect. In the middle of all that, he showed that. So he showed that gratitude. There's something special. And we see this. Avot did that all the time. So living a life of meaning with Torah, which we believe, or we may believe, in the face of adversity, encourages something about transcending towards something beyond oneself. The essence of resilience of life, and this is important, is not what, but how. So it's not what was accomplished in life, because sometimes we have no control. We have no control what happens to us. We think we do. But we have not. We have control 100% how we deal with what happens to us. Because it's not a question of what, it was a question of how life was lived. And that's the challenge. And we know that it's not where you're on the ladder, but which direction and what you're doing with that. But, you know, those are aphorisms. But there's something very, very, very important about that in what develops who we are. Okay, so in suffering, the range of choice is limited, but the attitudinal choices, that is still available. So sometimes the limitedness of the situation gives birth to a creative response to adversity from which we grow. So the freedom of choice is only meaningful in light of the Torah values which we have. So the attitudinal value concept, Rabbi Akiva says suffering is precious. What does it mean suffering is precious? Rabbi Akiva says, Amar Chabibim Yisurin in Sanhedrin. So the proper attitude to suffering makes suffering precious. How to deal with it. It's not suffering alone. We don't want to invite suffering. But that's reality. The question is what I do with it. So one who joyfully bears a chastisement that Kol HaSameach B'Yisurin Shabayim. You know, I've forgotten my English. I haven't learned my Hebrew yet, so I'm kind of in the middle. Okay? So Kol HaSameach B'Yisurin Shabayim Alav Mevi Yeshua L'Olam. There's something about the way you respond to that actually brings salvation to the world. So we bring salvation to the world through what we got. So Jewish resilience is about becoming, not overcoming. The need to expand in order to be able to contain the new you is shattered, no matter how much you feel. And now, what am I doing now? I'm quoting Sherry Mandel. Sherry Mandel went through terrible trauma. Her son, her young son, went on a tiyul, and people know his story, outside the yeshiva where they lived in Israel, and he was murdered by an Arab terrorist, young son. And this is what she wrote, okay? This is not Talmud. This is someone who went through a traumatic experience but had to make a decision. And this is what she decided. We always have to become bigger, greater. I can decide, make that situation of losing my son to be like, destroy my life. Like, you know, he was everything to me. But no, the sense of vulnerability and fracture can lead you towards connecting with something greater than yourself, connecting to others and divine. She made that active choice. She decided, you know what, I'm not going to let that trauma define myself, because this is really what the recovery journal is about, okay? We look at mental illness, that we go through difficult times in our life, and the me becomes a little part of it. Mental illness is part of the human condition. I mentioned this also on one other occasion during the week. You know, 3 years ago, I was asked to teach research to medical psychiatry residents. I said, Bob, let's go do some research. There was a group of 300 psychiatrists who were meeting a month later. I said, you know what, let's give the DSM, which is our classification of psychiatry, to these psychiatrists, and let's ask them to self-evaluate themselves according to them. From a scale of 0 to 5, 0 non-existent and 5 very severe, what percentage of psychiatrists admitted that some form of psychiatric illness? What percentage? 5%, 10%? What would you say? So, all would admit that they have themselves?
I'd say 50%.
50% would admit that some form of psychiatric illness themselves? Okay, let me tell you, 89% of the psychiatrists said that some form of psychiatric illness. I'm one of the 11% that's completely okay, but 89% said that some form of psychiatric. But you know what? It's not difficult, and the Rav mentioned a quarter, but it's actually about 2/3. About 2/3 of people go through life in some form of mental issue that needs to become a focus of management. Only about 1/3 of them get treatment. That's part of the stigma. But what the point is here, that it shouldn't be defining a person. It shouldn't be that I'm a mentally ill person and the me is a little thing. No. Because the recovery is that there's a me and I have a little bit of mental illness. Or there's a me and I have a little trauma in my life. But that doesn't necessarily mean to define myself. We're running out of time, but I just want to end off with someone. Because really, when you look at the concept of adversity in our approach and theories of dealing with it, Viktor Frankl epitomizes really what it's about. Now, Viktor Frankl, people talk about him as being the secular psychiatrist who went through the Holocaust and went through. Viktor Frankl, people don't know this, put on tefillin every day and felt most comfortable in Israel when he used to come visit. But this is what Viktor Frankl said, and for me this is very, very special and powerful. He said and by the way, he's reflecting Chazal when he says this. This is Torah. He says, between a stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So what is he saying? He's saying when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And that's the power of resilience. That's the Torah power of resilience. And that's a power that we can say, okay, I'm going to take the situation. Not only am I going to respond to it, but I'm going to respond to it and become a better person in the process. Thank you. Yeah, questions, yeah.
If we're going to make real progress, do we have to work towards preventative education? And can this kind of content, do you see an opportunity to work it into the school curriculums, even at the elementary level, to take away the stigma, to help build and train children in resilience?
I strongly agree with you on that, and not only do I agree with you, I'm actually doing something about it. I talk whenever I can to kids. As I mentioned earlier on, I did it on 2 occasions here in Toronto. Not about illness, about health, about mental health. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think we should do that. We shouldn't be scared to do it. I do it in Israel to all the classes of my children. And thank God we've had a few of them. I have 6 kids, and they go through all the classes they've gone through. But not on a bigger level, but it's something that one I agree. I think there should be a movement that focuses, that addresses that. But I 100% agree with you. And I think the places that are doing it, I'm an individual, but I think people are doing it in other places as well. But I think it's important. I agree with you. Yeah. Right.
I have a problem with what you said about Freud. Viktor Frankl says one thing, but when you were talking about people starving in the Shoah, the Bechira Chofshit disappears because you're only concentrating on making sure that you survive physically. We're no longer talking about intellectual or philosophical pursuits, but we have to survive. And once we have to fight for that survival, then you are limited in choices. You understand? Your choice, either you're going to eat or you're not going to eat. And if you don't eat, you're dead.
What you say makes a lot of sense, but in actual fact, it wasn't the case. Because people who looked at them, and every year I take a group of 30 doctors on a medical tour, a medicine and Shoah tour of Poland. The Rav says he's going to Poland. I take doctors every year, and I show them, not focusing on necessarily the historical, but look at doctors, because doctors did terrible things. I don't believe there'd be a Shoah if there really weren't doctors. The whole concept of the gas chambers came from psychiatrists. There were 6 psychiatry hospitals with gas chambers, and the whole idea came from the psychiatrist. 5. Do you know there was only one? Do you know there was only one? People don't know this, but there was only one death camp that was actually run by a doctor. And what kind of doctor was he? Psychiatrist. I bet none of you have heard of his name, but he actually set up Treblinka. And he had experience of running psychiatry hospitals. His name was Imfred Ebel, but none of you have heard of him because it's an embarrassment to our profession. I started writing about this and trying to expose it. He was fired after 6 weeks. He was considered the most successful concentration camp ever in the Nazi regime. He killed 280,000 Jews in 6 weeks. But they fired him because he didn't know how to get rid of the bodies. But how did he kill so many Jews in such a short time? So I'm just going off. I'll come back to your question. Okay? Because he used to walk around with a white coat and then calm the people, and if we could get the people into gas chambers. That's what happened in Treblinka. But we don't talk about that because it's an embarrassment to the medical and the psychiatry profession. But back to your question, Frankl said, how is it that some people really survived and survived well and some people didn't? Because all had the same amount of food or little food or the limitations. And there was something about people that found some kind of meaning in something, where the meaning could be, I wanted to see my family at the end, or I wanted to help this person. And those who helped other people weren't the people, and sometimes gave a bit of some of the food, were definitely not the people who died the quickest. There was something about people who were able to elevate themselves and say, it wasn't necessarily the case of the situation of the people who had the most food. There was something else going on here. And that's what Frankl responded to. He said, you know what, there's something about getting meaning in life that sometimes was more conducive to those people surviving long, and he didn't know how to explain it. But that's where his whole theory of logotherapy came from. And it really wasn't the case of just, survival of just whatever. And those who were stealing from others were definitely the ones that didn't survive the longest. It really wasn't the case. So you're right, it makes sense what you say. But in actual fact, the reports, if you look at the reports, it wasn't the case.
But we, Baruch Hashem, we have enough to eat. So we do not understand what it is to be at the point of starvation. My family and so forth and so on. We do not grasp what it is. So we cannot just say that, they said, we have to go on and so forth and so on. I appreciate what you're saying. But there's a problem involved there.
I hear what you're saying, and it's a controversial issue. I'm just going on reports, what people say that who went through that, and say that really wasn't a factor of that those who stole and took from others weren't the ones who survived the best. In fact, it could be the other way. The ones who helped the most were the ones who survived because they found some kind of meaning, did something for themselves in the situation. But it's an interesting subject. You can write a paper about it one day.
And also, it was the Wannsee conference set up the cyclone, and all the extermination, not the psychiatrists. It was Heydrich, Eichmann, and the rest of their goons.
But that was in 1942. And the gas chamber started in psychiatry hospitals in 1939. Okay. Yes, yeah.
The passage quoted on Yosef, in terms of his reframing, is there also, from his experience, that he had gone through several episodes of himself with Potiphar and being in the pit, that he had, not only in the pit, but in the prison, that he experienced, and he developed his own resiliency before he got to that stage of reframing.
But how did he develop resilience? What does it say when he was in his house of Potiphar with the experience with, he had a vision of his father. What is that? The roots, right? He saw his roots. Wow, they're my roots. That's what's going to get me through. He held on to something. That's what got him through. I'm going to hold on to my values.
He also had a long-term vision, these dreams, right? Were perhaps part of that long-term. He's thinking long-term, and how it's not about just the moment. It's about how do I get through this, and what can I do towards the future?
Looking at the picture, systems, yeah.
If you have any comments, you spoke about the situation in Israel and the terrorism. Any special comments in terms of being over a long period of time, especially in the territories where it's sort of, every year there's a number of attacks and how it affects the general population?
Look, that's a whole discussion in itself, and we can talk 2 hours on that, but it's a wonderful question. I can just say 2 things. First of all, a very small percentage of people who are actually involved in terrorist attack actually get post-traumatic stress. There's certain elements about it that are conducive to a high. For example, when a child is killed, that or whatever.
The population.
But there's something about the togetherness that really helps people through it. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think there's something about the sense of community and people come around that really pulls people through, and it's phenomenal. What goes on, you say, that's when I say, wow. this is a special place to live in. When I see the sense of community, or how people come around, and there's certain organizations that really do it in a very special manner, and there's so many different facets of that. I want to mention names of organizations, but there's something about when people and the media and everyone's together. Then after when they still go back to the, you know what's fascinating in Toronto, you don't hear cars blowing the horn. It doesn't, in Israel constantly, just you know, they'll go back to all of that often, but when it's times of crisis, people are just, and they carry people through. There's something very special about that sense of community, and I think that maybe that's really what it does. That's a major factor that contributes towards dealing with resilience and then resilience concept.
Well, so we'll take 2 more questions, and then we have to wrap up. Thank you.
You mentioned the suicide in Israel. Is there a specific age group that is affected more than another, or is it just across?
So suicide in Israel is actually pretty low compared to the rest of the world. That doesn't mean depression is low. But there's something about the taboo in religion, because there are a lot of religious people and traditional, you know, that's why I love working with the Haredi population, because they don't commit suicide so much. And also don't sue as much, but they don't commit suicide. There's something, and that doesn't mean they're less depressed. There's something about religious people in times of adversity, something about sometimes holding on to that taboo. And the Holocaust is a different story. The Holocaust was a massive amount of suicide that we don't talk about. But I tell you, there's certain subgroups in Israel that have a high incidence of suicide. I sit on the National Council Prevention of Suicide, and there's certain groups that we know we need to focus on. For example, the highest rate of suicide in Israel is amongst Ethiopian immigrants, which is like something like 4 or 5 times the national average. And the second highest group of suicide, which is about 3 or 4 times the national average, are Orthodox people, Haredim, who become non-frum because they feel completely disconnected. They're not accepted by the secular population. Also, they have no knowledge, no background, no education, and they're completely disowned by their Haredi families. And therefore, they just, you know, Durkheim is 100 years to the anniversary of his death, who was the father of, you know, suicide. He spoke about the 3 types of reasons for suicide. Egoistic, when people are really suffering, they feel pain. Altruistic, when they're committing suicide for the nation, like kamikaze, or people who jump on grenades to save the people around. And then anomic. Anomic is when a person feels alone, disconnected on their own. And that's very, very depressing. And that's why these people are committing suicide, because they really, and we're seeing, by the way, a lot more of that. Part of that is also because of the thing of social media. Do you know that in America, in North America in general, only about 56% of teenagers now dating, whereas 10 years ago it was 86%. There's much less car accidents and drug abuse, because they're sitting in their rooms and they're communicating with their whatever. But they're not going out into the roads, and therefore they're not dying from car accidents and drug abuse as much, but they're committing suicide and getting more depressed. And therefore they're not. So there's something about this anomic thing that we're seeing much more of today, because of the nature of society and the way that media has taken over everything. But that's a whole other discussion on its own, but a good question.
Last question.
Yeah.
I was actually interested in asking about your marathon, because I feel like what you were saying was that in that last mile, that you have to suspend what you know and just take each step forward. Is that what you're getting?
No, I'm saying something more than that. I'm saying I'm suspending what I thought that I was capable of being before. I'm digging deep and I'm defining myself. I'm saying, you know what? I'm going to become a changed person on this planet. I'm going to change my I'm going to be different. I'm going to define my running ability in the next mile. It's not a question of what have I done? What have I worked on? What do I actually have? No, I'm going to become a different person based on that. And it's someone who's really invested and really, it's a metaphor, right? And marathon is not everything in life. I'm not even saying it's way ahead or whether it's in second place, but there's something very special about it as a metaphor, that it does something. And I really believe the concept of defining yourself. And I think that in all situations, because it really is a situation of adversity, people collapse sometimes in those situations. The question, what can I do? And a lot of it's all mental. It's all mental. When it comes to the end of a marathon, it's all mental. It's not a physical thing. What do you do with that? And I believe that's a metaphor for dealing with adversity in general. Thank you.
We will be here for the next for the next 10 or 15 minutes for individual questions, but I just want to thank you all for coming out. And I have one request. Come and see the hospital in Israel. That's all. Thank you very much.